Welcome to the Shurman Report. Here's Peter Shurman.
Well, good Monday evening to you. I guess the evening part is really beginning to resonate these days, as is the fact that it seems like October finally is feeling like October. I'm Peter Shurman. You're with the Shurman Report. I've got Andy Stinton with us today. It's a minor push and shove, but you're used to that by now. But that's because he always comes with topics ready to eat. Today, do we pay politicians enough to get really good people? We'll talk about it. Wait and listen to what we think. Why doesn't Pierre Poilievre have a platform? I keep telling Andy why, but he's not buying it. Stay tuned. And do we vote parties in when elections come around, or do we toss them out? Good discussion, I promise. Before we do any of that, I'll have an extended Shurman viewpoint on the weekend marches and what I think about what's going on in the Middle East and, by extension, on this side of the pond. That's coming up right after this.
Now, the Shurman Report continues.
On Saturday, Activist Toronto was the generally unwilling host to yet another march. Just what we needed. The organizing group appears to have been some people calling themselves Toronto for Palestine. Toronto for Palestine, for the most part, standard fare, Palestinian and now Lebanese flags, the main feature, colorful costumes and keffiyehs, drums and bullhorns, the whole 9 yards. On X, they're posting the following. Our demands to the Canadian government have been very clear. 1, call to end the genocide in Gaza and Lebanon. 2, call to end the occupation. 3, full arms embargo. And 4, sanction and boycott Israel. Maybe I also have a demand. Leave us alone. And by us, I mean good, peace-loving Canadian people, yes, including Jews. That's my demand. Leave us alone. It's not a nasty wish, is it? But if you attack Jewish people or other Canadians who support Jewish people, and there are so many of those, even if only in your mind, think about it and stop. Personally, I find the entire Middle East mess to be woefully sad. It's very sad, definitely, but there is no occupation, there is no arms embargo, there are no sanctions, and there is no boycott. A tiny country like Israel, which comprises in total about 21,000 kilometers, is so in need of defense that it spends more per capita on defense than any other country in the world. And that's before what may arrive as aid from any other power. Why does Israel do what it's doing, so gravely impacting its own economy, its own general life? Is it to hurt other people? Hardly, because not doing what Israel is doing would mean no Israel. That's the reason. And yet the downtown Toronto march is loaded with people who are simply joining in, having a lot of fun, right? Have you ever given any serious thought to that? Even worse, have you considered how all of us could be pretty seriously affected if this has no clear solution, and soon? Let's look at the so-called demands and respond. First, call to end the genocide in Gaza and Lebanon. Well, there is not and has never been any genocide in either of those two places. Never any genocide perpetrated anywhere in history by Israel or Jews. Against us, yes. By us, never. A genocide, by definition, seeks to wipe out a full race of people. Islam, one of the world's most prolific and followed religions, has roughly 1.5 billion adherents. Israel has absolutely no quarrel with Islam. As for genocide, the numbers, if not the motivation, would make that impossible. However, threatening to kill all Jews, and there are about 8 million in Israel, maybe 16 million worldwide, does constitute an announced intention to commit genocide. So uneducated people in that march learn the definition of what you're talking about, learn about genocide, and decide if you want it applied to your actions, because it is absolutely not evident in Israel's jurisdiction. It is not evident anywhere in the territory. More on that in a moment. Number 2, call to end the occupation. Israel occupies Israel and only Israel. Any inclusion, or should I say any incursion, into Gaza, the West Bank, or Lebanon is to remove stated enemies of the state of Israel and to then return home. The occupation you refer to is one we Westerners understand well. What you really mean by the so-called occupation is the occupation of Israel by you, wannabe. You believe that it is not Israeli or Jewish land, but you see, it is. There is ample proof that it was the ancient homeland of the Jewish people, thousands of years ago, before Christ, who was born there as a Jew, I might add, and before Muhammad, who only appeared some 1,200 years ago, approximately 600 in the Common Era. There is no occupation in Israel. It belongs to the Israelites, the Jewish people, then, now, and always. So you'd better get over how you see things if you believe otherwise. Number 3, full arms embargo. Really? Who dares to build underground tunnels, to smuggle in all manner of arms and munitions for the sole purpose of inflicting harm on Israel? You know the answer. Israel procures and manufactures the arms it uses for defense and only for defense, and it only uses them for that purpose. Number 4, finally, you call for sanctions and a boycott of Israel. You've tried that before. If you hate Jews so much, best you destroy all your electronics and throw away all your medicines, because most of both of those commodities, which you use readily, would not even exist were it not for the genius of Israel and its inhabitants. I am one of many voices. My program is not the top-rated one of its type on the internet, but when I look into the camera and speak into the microphone, hundreds and often thousands see and hear what I have to say, though I am far from the only one saying it. The current hostilities would not ever have broken out if thousands of trained by Iran, funded by Iran militants had not rushed into Israel 1 year ago today and spent the next 6 or 7 hours slaughtering, burning, spearing, knifing, raping innocent people, women, men, children, and filming it all for the world to see your heroism in eliminating people not looking for any fight and not even armed. Those were not brave soldiers who did that. They were pigs. That incident awoke a sleeping giant. Israel as a country, its defense force, the regulars and the reservists are the mightiest fighters in the world. And they willingly go into battle when called upon to do so, ready to die for their country. This is something special. And there is something about this year-long war, without end apparently. The Israelis are not responding to Western calls for ceasefire, and they won't. It is clear the decision was made to root out and decapitate Israel's enemies once and for all, however long it might take. That's what you're seeing. That's what we're all seeing, nothing else. Yet, in Western countries like France, with a 10% Muslim population, President Emmanuel Macron demands a ceasefire and arms limitations to Israel. It isn't that he doesn't understand what I've patiently explained. It's about popular support at home. Here's what Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu had to say about Monsieur Macron.
I have a message for President Macron. Today, Israel is defending itself on 7 fronts against the enemies of civilization. We're fighting in Gaza against Hamas, those savages who murdered, raped, beheaded, and burned our people on October 7th. We're fighting in Lebanon against Hezbollah, the most heavily armed terror organization in the world, which was planning an even greater massacre than October 7th on our northern border, and that has rocketed Israeli towns and cities for nearly a year. We're fighting against the Houthis in Yemen and the Shiite militias in Iraq and Syria that together have launched hundreds of drones and missile attacks against Israel. We're fighting against terrorists in Judea and Samaria who are trying to murder civilians in the heart of our cities. And we're fighting against Iran, which last week fired over 200 ballistic missiles directly at Israel, and which stands behind the seven-front war against Israel. As Israel fights the forces of barbarism led by Iran, all civilized countries should be standing firmly by Israel's side. Yet President Macron and some other Western leaders are now calling for an arms embargo against Israel. Shame on them. Is Iran imposing an arms embargo on Hezbollah, on the Houthis, on Hamas, and on its other proxies? Of course not. The axis of terror stands together. But countries who supposedly oppose this terror axis call for an arms embargo on Israel. What a disgrace. Well, let me tell you this. Israel will win with or without their support. But their shame will continue long after the war is won. For in defending ourselves against this barbarism, Israel is defending civilizations against those who seek to impose a dark age of fanaticism on all of us. Rest assured, Israel will fight until the battle is won, for our sake and for the sake of the peace and security of the entire world.
And here's some video shot yesterday in Dublin, Ireland. The crowd is shouting, "Hands off Lebanon." News for you. It won't be hands until Lebanon is free of Hezbollah. Israel will be playing an active role.
Hands off Lebanon! 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 Hands off Lebanon!
Oh, and let's not forget the Toronto March yesterday.
Right now! Right now! Stop fucking genocide! Stop fucking genocide! Stop fucking genocide! Stop fucking genocide!
Just for clarity, what they were chanting was "no fucking genocide," just so you know. So Toronto marchers, if you want this carnage to stop, change your slogans and change your minds. Tell the fighters you appear to support that Israel is not going anywhere, but that those you support very well soon may. If it's true that Israel is a sovereign nation, and it is, and if it's true that, as with all sovereign nations, Israel has the right to defend itself, and it does, this is not over, and no amount of marching will make it so. Israel hasn't even begun what's going to happen to Iran. Good people of faith understand a few things. First, Jews will never take whatever's dished out again. Second, Jews understand how to fight. Third, Israel was attacked mercilessly, no other country. And fourth, it will never happen again.
Now, the Shurman Report continues.
Well, if you're one of the regulars and you watch or listen on a current basis, you know that one of the cast of characters here is a fellow named Andy Stinton, who we like, notwithstanding anything. We just like him. But he's been showing up, and this was, it rankled me a bit. He's been showing up from Costa Rica the last couple of weeks. So what we'll say today is, welcome back to Toronto, Oakville to be precise. Andy, how are you?
Okay, couple of things. I do not like the reference when you say in that sardonic Shurman voice, one of the cast of characters, like I'm some cartoon thing from a cheap paper.
Oh, no, Andy, I'm one of the cast of characters. It's who we are.
You're more one of the villains.
Okay, I'll admit to it. Guilty as charged. Listen, You and I were talking about some of the things we could talk about. We don't talk about the mainstream stuff, or we'd be getting into arguments about uh, Trump and Harris and the Middle East, and I don't want to do that. There's plenty of time for me to do that in other parts of the show and with other people. So let's talk about politics in Ontario. We have Ford. We have no idea when he's going to call an election, but we think it's going to be sometime before it would be due in 2026. We can leave that alone. But the part that interested you, and through you, me, is our politicians, generally speaking, and not just in Ontario. Let's broaden it to Canada. Are they underpaid compared to, say, CEOs of companies? Because in effect, I mean, if you take it at the, say, the ministerial level, that's a CEO of a company and then some.
Okay? Yes, this was without a doubt. People complain about politicians, me inclusive, but we don't pay them enough. There are people at Ontario Power Generation, presidents, who make 6 times that amount.
Oh, more than 6 times.
I was being polite. They were a client of mine, and some very lovely people. Having said that, some of them are very talented, others maybe not so much. However, why are we paying the prime minister the amount of money we owe? Is it $300,000 when a CEO of an equivalent company in private industry would be making mega millions? You know,
well, you know, it's a good question, and there's no obvious answer. So let me give you an answer by way of the result, and I think you'll just agree with this. The reason why you don't get, with any consistency, good people in politics is because you don't pay them enough. Good people can go out and make 3, 4, 500, 600,000, and if they're in the right spot, make 6 million. But we pay our politicians in Ontario exactly what I was paid when I became a politician in 2007, and they had changed it the year before in 2006, and the amount was $120,000. That's what it was, and that's what it is.
You know what? Here's what it is. You're the smart one in this duo. Me, I'm pretty stupid. So here's what we do. We pay them going rate like any other job. So if I get a mechanic, there is a going rate for a mechanic. I pay that mechanic. I don't pay him 10%. I don't go to a mechanic, because I'd be incredibly suspicious, who says I only charge $10 an hour, because they're going to be crap. That's the situation we've got. We've got politicians that are working for less than 10% of what an equivalent CEO did. So here's what we do. We go and hire them. On every level, we make the position attractive to top executives. The money we will save, that will be such an investment, because they will say, well, you can just cut this and cut this out, and there's $1 billion saved.
They also know how to talk to a staff, as opposed to people who, let's say they used to be, I'm not demeaning anybody by saying this, a plumber or a farmer, perfectly valid professions, and now suddenly they're wearing a suit every day, male or female, and they're going into a legislative assembly, or the House of Commons for that matter, and they're making, in most cases, considerably less than they would have been in their former jobs. Now, I can tell you, in my own case, I took the 120 and I went for it knowing it was 120, because I had come from 300,000, but I had drawn a line under that part of my life, and I was saying at age 59 at the time, I'm going to go into politics to see what it's really like, and rather than just comment on it, I'm going to find out if it's for real. And you know what? It's not.
That's admirable. That's admirable civic responsibility.
No, it was just for me.
But on every other side of it is so frigging wrong. I think I'll go take a look. I think I'll go play in governing our province.
Not really.
I'll go play. That's
no. Don't take me wrong. I took it entirely seriously. What I said to myself was, "You are 59. You have made some money. You can afford to do this. So what they pay is not particularly relevant. Let's go see if you can make a difference in your life and in some people's lives." And I did.
And I have no doubt that you did. But I don't want somebody governing our province, our country, okay, who is not totally qualified.
Totally correct.
So
no argument.
Trudeau or Poilievre or what's her name, Bonnie Crombie or Ford. At least Ford, in his defense, has some business experience.
A lot of business experience, and he's done well.
And he's made a lot of money.
Yep.
And he tends to be more of a businessman. I don't always agree with him, but he tends to be more of a businessman than Poilievre or Crombie or Trudeau.
Well, you don't know that yet, because Crombie has been a mayor. I don't know what that tells you about her business acumen, but Mississauga is a nice city. So maybe she gets to take some credit for that. Why isn't it?
I used to live in Mississauga, and the vision that McCallion had went from a small town into a nameless building development.
So you didn't like the big build up into a sort of a second downtown for Toronto?
No, and I think they've handled it badly. If you drive around Mississauga, I don't live there anymore. If you drive around Mississauga, it's a mess. It's not attractive unless you have millions and millions of dollars. It's not an attractive place.
Well, I'm not moving to Mississauga anytime soon, but let's go back to the topic at hand. If what you're saying is we've got to look at people who are qualified to go into Parliament, or at least who we have to sit and vote for as qualified, we have to look at them as we would look to hire somebody who is at a senior level in a corporation. In other words, they know how to handle people and they know how to handle things, money.
And they know how to handle money. So maybe we try a new system called the anti-governmental system, coming soon to a government near you, is where the Prime Minister hires the appropriate person with a budget of $5 million a year.
That would be a way to do it. I'm not saying it has to be 5 million, but I'll tell you an interesting little anecdote, and then we'll jump to another topic. Once upon a time, I spoke to a guy. They're not so generously known as bagmen. And I'm not going to say for what party, but I said, how many people in the Parliament are qualified to do their job? Not talking party, talking about how many. He said about 25%. I said, what are the other 75% doing there? He said they were real estate agents and plumbers and people who worked in the environment they came from, who thought they could get a good job, be pillars of the community, make a little bit more money than they did, and they're useless as tits on a bowl.
I don't think you can say that anymore in a woke society.
I can say it, and I just did.
It's not very diverse, Pete.
Anyway, it's going back to the numbers and not what I said. If it's really as true as that man told me, that 25% are qualified and 75% are what we think they are, then no wonder we're in the kind of trouble that we're in. And I can say this too, as a former politician in Ontario, people always approach me and say, well, you have a pension. In Ontario, you don't even get a pension. There's no pension. And I'm not whining, but it is interesting that only Ontario in the entire country, only Ontario does not pension off its former politicians. I'm just complaining a little bit. Okay.
I'm not whining as he launches into a whine.
Must have said it for a reason.
I didn't get a pension. I didn't, but everybody else gets one. Oh my God.
I went in it. I went in it eyes wide open. I went in it eyes wide open. Is Pierre Poilievre wasting his popularity and respect by all of what you called, not me, this non-confidence vote stuff, and general, your word again, prancing around?
I do have a way with words, don't
I?
Yeah. What do I mean is what you might be questioning me.
I might.
Obviously, we are, and the second part of that thing, we should stop voting people out. Obviously, we are of the mindset at the present point in time, as we were with the Ontario government, was to get rid of the Liberals, right? We voted the Liberals out. We voted Harper out last time. And this time we're going to vote out Trudeau.
Correct.
Now, it would
and
be
we voted out Wynne in Ontario.
Yes. If we keep going on this route, we are going to keep ending up with bad governments unless we have, term limits.
I can predict for you, Andy, because I have been alive and living in Canada for these 70 plus years and voting for most of them, that in Canada, it is an absolute habit to vote people out and never vote them in. Canadians just have a psyche we don't do this year-long campaign like you're seeing in the States. The campaign is short. We decide in the term, usually 2 terms and definitely 3 terms, that we've had enough with Joe Blow and we're going to go with Jane Blow, whatever it happens to be. In this particular case, enough of Trudeau, and even liberal friends of mine say that. We're going to give Pierre a chance and see what happens. That's what we do. That's how Doug Ford got elected.
So here's what we've got. Let's just discuss the state of our government according partially to you, partially to me. Let's give the next person who's going to be prime minister a chance. Let's give him a chance because, you know, I in my business always like to hire people who I'm giving a chance to.
I agree.
Along the way, let's underpay them. Let's also figure out how this is going to end up badly as it has for the last 100 years.
I don't know. Take for example, the current guy in office. He doesn't need any money. He's inherited a fortune, and there are all kinds of stories about other money, but we're not going there. But he's certainly worth many, many millions of dollars, and he inherited that from Pierre. That being the case, who did he take office because he was concerned about the paycheck? Obviously not. With Pierre Poilievre, he's making as much as he's ever made now. Now, I understand he's a good investor and has a little nest egg, but that's just idle talk. The point is, he's going in eyes wide open, and he's not going in as the son of a millionaire.
No, he's going in as unqualified. At least, and
I don't agree.
You know, I'm bipartisan. At least Justin Trudeau had some political background, the same as Ben Mulrooney would.
Oh my
Pierre
God!
Poilievre,
What? Because they have a last name?
No, he at least grew up in a political background. What's Poilievre's background? What's Poilievre's?
Poilievre has been living the dream politically, which is all he ever wanted to do since he's 20 and he's 40, give or take. I don't know the exact ages, but he's been in it for 20 years. He gets it. He's a very studious guy.
He doesn't get business.
I think that he doesn't have to get business.
Yes, he does.
I went into business. Look,
country is a business.
I got co-opted into being a manager in a business that I was already in, and it's a business, you know, radio. Yeah. I was a technician by trade. That's how I got hired. From technician, I got to talk a little bit by doing some overnight shifts because I thought I could, and I guess they agreed with me. Hop, skip, and a jump, and the next thing you know, I'm the president of the company, and I did well with it. How did that happen? It happened because I learned by watching and I learned by doing. But the most overriding concern, and I think you've had this experience, is you hire people or put people in the right place so that, for example, if you're not a sales genius, you hire a great sales manager. If you're not a marketing genius, you hire a great marketing manager, and you have these people report to you. Ultimately, you make decisions based on their information. I think Pierre is going to be phenomenal.
I wouldn't know. I've never seen his platform, so I think that's a very positive.
You won't see his platform until about 3 months before an election.
It's a game. It's not. I want somebody to govern this country like I have to run my business. You had to run a business, not playing stupid friggin' games.
Oh, well, you want to hire a CEO. You don't want to. You don't want a prime minister. You want a CEO. It's not going to happen.
Well, I'd also like to know what they stand for.
You mean like Kamala Harris, or for that matter, Donald Trump?
Well, at least no, Trump. I'll stick up for Trump. He has a concept of a plan about health care. He has a concept of the plan. Harris has answered questions. I have contacted the local PC candidate, and they say, "Oh, this was their answer. No, we don't have a platform. We'll publish it later. But trust me, Pierre is a very smart man." You have
heard Pierre's policies, but he is doing exactly what every other politician of every party does. You don't put a book out there 3, 4, 5, who knows, maybe it's 10 months before an election, because we don't know right now. You don't put a book out there that says, here's what I'm going to do thus and so. You talk in broad generalities about where you want to go, and you drill down and become granular when the election is declared. That's how it works.
No, I'd like to know what he's going to do now. Seriously, I like to know what people stand for. When they come for a job interview with me, they don't turn around to me and say, you know what, when you decide whether you're going to hire me, I'll tell you what my experience is and what my plans for your company are.
Not comparable.
Making exceptions for politicians.
It's not comparable. A politician is not going in as a CEO. Hopefully he becomes one.
They're going in as my employee, and as my employee, I want to know what they stand for. And that's
You will.
not unreasonable.
You will. Nobody's asking you to go cast a vote at this point.
Well, why is he prancing around with all these non-confidence votes? Just, oh, look at me, look at me, look at me. I can say stupid things in Parliament.
You obviously look at, I mean, we're going to end this here because I'm not going to win and you're not going to win. The bottom line is right now, you don't like him. That's it. Just admit it.
I don't know. I haven't met him. I haven't heard him talk on his policies.
So take my word for it. I'm your friend. He's a great guy.
Hang on. I'm just asking that he tells me what he stands for. At the present time, he hasn't. So no, he's not. I don't have any time for him. When he
we will have this conversation again, Mr. Stinton.
We will.
And that's all the time we have.
Really? What happened? We were going to discuss fonts. Now
we were going to discuss fonts, but we're at 17 minutes and we're over time. So I'll see you perhaps later this week, definitely next week.
It's just because you don't like fonts, isn't it?
I like San Francisco. Take care, Andy. Good to see you.
Bye.
You're with the Shurman Report. Daily news commentary live at 5 p.m. Video version live at X, YouTube, and Facebook. Here's Peter Shurman.
I hope you have a terrific Monday evening, and I hope that we've contributed by providing some food for thought. Listen or watch again tomorrow when we'll have Rick Eckstein rejoining us. He's in and out of the Middle East and provides his own views, but informed as they are by his political and military contacts over there. Thanks for listening, thanks for viewing, and be well.
The Shurman Report, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the video version at YouTube, Facebook, and always at petershurman.com. Thanks for listening to the Shurman Report. If you'd like to connect with Peter directly, just go to petershurman.com.